Hello and welcome to another SCOM Bomb, the weekly Google Hangout where I, Will Grant, and my colleague down there, Rod Lamberts, discuss the world of science communication and what's happening in the world. Rod, how are you today?
Look, I'm well, but I'm exhausted. Getting up this early to do a SCOM Bomb before lunch is confusing. I haven't had my lunchtime scotch. I haven't had my morning, the breakfast bongs. It's all been ruined.
It's very hard to achieve all of that, but you get to have a coffee while you're watching the SCOM Bomb, or perhaps a cup of genteel tea, if that's what you do.
Bottle of water.
Oh, look at you. From Australia's greatest party university, Australian National University. There we go.
Yes. From Canberra's party town.
Rod, who are we joined with today?
Well, we're going to talk to Andy Ridley today, and he's the CEO of Earth Hour. So, he controls the Earth for 1 hour a year. He's in charge of the planet, and so I'm very interested to speak to someone like this, because I'm curious to know if all the presidents have to sign off and hand over the launch codes and that sort of thing. Andy, how you going?
Good, thanks, mate. Good morning. How you going? Sorry to get you up so early.
Well, we are academics. Getting up before lunchtime, it's good for us to see how the other half live. I think it's important.
I should point out it's 9 o'clock here in Singapore.
See, so Andy's looking particularly weary. It's not the eye surgery; it's the early hour. Yeah. Can you tell us? I'm going to sit in as a representative of the ignorant audience, and I've kept myself deliberately ignorant. So, what's Earth Hour?
Well, Earth Hour is the hour every year that people turn their lights off to show that they care about the planet. I guess that's the kind of what it's most famous for. But I guess it's become a lot more than that. It's probably now the world's biggest environmental movement in its own right. It's hundreds of millions of people take part, 7,000 cities. But we sort of started it at the beginning to do a lot more than turn out lights. It was really how could we start to bring together a really massive amount of people to affect change. So that's what we've been trying to do over the last 8 years, and we've gone a reasonably long way to do that.
Were you involved in the beginning? Back to how you started it. I want to know, you're the world champion now of getting people to turn their lights out. Was this something that you were really good at? Like when you were in a share house or something, when everyone was wandering around, it's like, turn the lights off, turn the lights off. Is that where you came from?
I remember getting clipped around the ear by my old man for not turning the lights out. But no, I mean, I hadn't really thought about being a world champion in anything, but I do quite like that idea now. But really, we were just trying to find something that pretty much anybody and everybody could do. And turning out a light, symbolic as it is something that everybody can do. And it's hard to find that single unifying moment.
Mm.
That's where the idea came from.
So were you there from the beginning, or did you come on later? You were there from day one?
Yeah, look, there was actually a parent of Earth Hour. It was called Future Makers. It had the same sort of principles, this idea that everybody can do something, and if you get lots of people to do something, then the collective power starts to get interesting. Yeah. But Future Makers didn't work that well because it didn't have that moment, the moment in time, that moment of unity. So that's what we were trying to look for, and we ended up coming up with this idea of Earth Hour. There's a few of us at the beginning, and I'm the last one standing.
Is that right? So all the others died from lack of electricity or something?
They basically all died, yeah.
Well, that's a pity. Were they very old?
A lot of them were very, very old.
So it started with an advertising agency or something as well, didn't it? Have I read that right?
Yeah, so it was started by WWF and Leo Burnett and Fairfax, and very different time. Fairfax was, of course, massive, and the biggest newspaper in Sydney for our audience, anyways. And Leo Burnett's the ad agency in Sydney was the other one. So there was a group of three of us. That's kind of what made it quite unique.
So basically, you got drunk during a blackout or something, and that's how it got born?
Unusually, the idea actually sort of really formed itself at a breakfast, and no one was drunk. Everyone was maybe possibly hungover, but no one was drunk, which is quite unusual. But I think the dream kind of got bigger and bigger as we got more and more into it, and certainly part of it was formed.
Early on in that breakfast meeting, that high-level advertising breakfast meeting, other things that you were thinking as a symbolic demonstration, walk to work or not wear shoes or
not really. The original idea actually came from something. One of my team found an article that said that in Bangkok they'd had an oil fuel shortage, and the governor of Bangkok had asked people to turn off all non-essential power. So like lights and you know, videos, whatever. And in this article, it said you could see it from space. And I never knew whether, I don't know if that was true. I don't even know if they really did it. But we saw this article, and we were having this kind of think tank breakfast, which I'd pulled together, and we were in a hotel in Sydney. And one of my team, someone called Liz Potter, brought up that story. So we sort of jumped on it. And imagine if we could get Sydney to do that. Imagine what the harbour would look like. Imagine. You know, just imagine where it would work. And originally the idea was sort of quite a negative idea. It was sort of, let's do it as a protest against John Howard's administration. But the more we talked about it, the more we brought more people in, the more it turned into this idea that, actually, no, this is just a brilliant way of sort of voting. It's a brilliant way of showing hopefulness and a brilliant way of engaging pretty much anyone that you want. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you're in a strip club or if you're a priest, or if you're both, or if you're you know, a football player, whatever. Anybody and everybody could be part of it.
Do you get any strip clubs turning the lights out?
Yeah.
So.
Like a lot.
What do they do? Do they do like?
No, I remember the first year, some famous venues in Newtown in Sydney took part. They did their show by torchlight.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Like the last Earth Hour, I was at a friend's house, and his youngest daughter was obsessed with Earth Hour coming up. She was insane about it. She was finding candles they didn't know they had yet, probably gifts from their parents' 21st and all that sort of thing. She had it all set up and sorted, candles ready to rock, lit all the candles half an hour early, turned all the lights off. And in 15 minutes, she got the shits turned on her phone and started playing games. And I'm looking at her saying, I don't know if that's in the spirit of the thing, you know, running around with a torch, playing games.
Adapt to Generation Y though, Rod. They've got attention spans that are much shorter. So Earth Hour might need to become Earth 15 minutes.
Yeah, Earth second.
I suppose the idea though was, and I think one of the things we sort of tapped into at the beginning was, you're trying to give people, it gave people an excuse to talk to each other, or to you know, just do something a bit different. And to get subject like environment, especially back in 2007, it was pretty hard to get it on the agenda. I think the world's changed a bit since then, but it's still pretty hard to get any issue on the agenda where everyone's thinking about it, even for an hour. So, you know, we were, in that first year, we were really pleased to see there was like speed dating going on the night. The cafes and restaurants were doing special Earth Hour nights. And for us, that's kind of exactly what it's about, because one of the big challenges with environment is that often, and with science, you're talking about science communication, is that it sits in the bunch that already know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Or
it'll sit in another bunch who are so skeptical about what you're talking about, they're never going to change their minds. Yeah. But the real territory, if you want to get change, is in the middle somewhere. And so that's what we were trying to do. And you know, in some countries that's been phenomenally successful.
Can you tell us about those other countries then? Because you know, typically we see a lot of environmental discussions that we're used to anyway in the Western world, in Australia or America or Britain or things like that. How has Earth Hour gone in some of those other countries around the world? It's very much a global phenomenon.
Yeah, look, the biggest growth of Earth Hour has been in Asia by quite a long way, and probably the second is Latin America. And I think what's kind of interesting about Earth Hour is it hasn't sort of come out from America, it hasn't come out from Europe. The very fact that it was originated out of Australia probably is one of the reasons why it succeeded, because it didn't have the baggage that comes from the big kind of you know, top-down global Western lecturing, So what we've seen, like probably the country that's really been the most impressive for us is Indonesia. And what they've done, it's really completely grassroots up. It's community driven. There's millions of people who take part in it. But they've built these kind of projects around cities. So particularly in Java, there's 30-odd cities that have their own Earth Hour communities that are now doing stuff in those communities for their communities. And then that kind of just then kind of taps into the kind of the global experience at the same time. So it goes far beyond the hour, which is kind of why we started. You know, as I said, turning out the lights for an hour is just an hour, but what it is a great moment to get people to come together to do more.
Running on that line, because you know, Will and I were doing some maths this morning before we started talking to you.
I figured.
And we worked out there's 8,600 hours in a year.
Right.
What do you do for the other 8,559 hours or something when it's not Earth Hour? Because I know you're the CEO of this, but how do you spend the rest of your days? Is it just cocktails and Mai Tais in Singapore? And
I mean, pretty much. I wake up on the Saturday morning, realize it's Earth Hour, and then we just get organised.
spend and the rest of the year is just big money.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, we designed Earth Hour in sort of 3 stages. So the first one was the symbolic. Does anyone care? Basically, turning out the lights really just shows I care. Right, step 1. Step 2 for us is, right, how do we then take that community beyond the hour? And that is significantly difficult. That's a pretty hard thing to do. So we've been trying over the last few years to try and come up with ways and means to do that. So if you think about it, like the first 3 years was how can we get up to lots of cities? So by about 2009, we had about 4,000 odd cities taking part. The last 4 years, we've been working on the Beyond the Hour stage, and this year we launched what's the 3rd stage, which is, right, now we've got lots of people doing stuff beyond the hour. How can that now evolve into a kind of interconnected movement? So the biggest breakthrough we got in terms of going beyond the hour came out of Russia. We ran this campaign which we call I Will If You Will. So it's basically, I will do something good for the environment. Sorry, other way around. I will do something brave, funny, stupid, hilarious, if you will do something good for the environment. So you get 20 of your mates to do something good for the environment, and so that was part of the campaign in 2012. And the Russians took that campaign and said, okay, we want to get this major piece of legislation passed in Russia. But in order to do that, we need to get at least 100,000 Russians to petition the Russian parliament. So they started doing I Will If You Wills. So, for example, the CEO of WWF in Russia swam in the Arctic if 5,000 people would sign the petition.
And after he died, who took over from him?
Well, he was recovered, and he's okay now. He's actually quite a crazy guy, but quite an amazing guy at the same time. But so they got this piece of legislation passed. They got 100,000 people in about 20 days. The legislation went in front of the Russian parliament, and it got passed. And WWF have been trying to get that legislation passed for 7 years. They got it done in 6 months.
I Will If You Will. Have you got any others? That sounds great.
But what that did was it proved you could use a model. You could use Earth Hour to get a big outcome. And in fact, I think this month they're going to do a second one, which is going to protect an area of forest twice the size of France. So you go from 1 hour lights out, doesn't mean much, but it's incredibly important, inspirational, symbolic. But that's what you can do with it. And that's
so he's going to wrestle a live bear or something. Is that the next? I
would hope there will be bears involved in the next one, just for.
Do you ever propose the challenges? Because I'm seeing all kinds of possibilities for excellent hijinks and great fun here, plus doing something good. Well, I'm less concerned about those.
What's the recent meme that's gone around Facebook amongst a lot of Gen Y people? It's the neck nominate. That's it.
People have died from that, eh?
Yeah, they have, but I'm saying because it's a very viral sort of phenomenon. People drinking a beer and then they nominate a friend. But that nomination and that social license and that social pressure, I think, can be harnessed in the way that you're saying about these Russian campaigns. Can be really used in a similar way for positive environmental change.
You mean commit suicide online for the environment? Is that what I'm hearing you suggest, Will?
Not quite, but someone
online will never. No, I'm joking. So but I mean, the coolest thing about it was that it started to be taken up by different countries. So Argentina did one. They did a campaign around I Will If You Will and using the same sort of idea, and they ended up getting a 3.4 million hectare marine protected area established off the Argentinian coast, all through just like people power, signing petitions, lobbying, but all off the back of Earth Hour. And so, they're a couple of the big ones, but there's lots of smaller ones. So I guess you are trying to work out how to tap into experiential campaigning rather than just liking something.
I want to shift to some of the critiques of the campaign, because as you've mentioned quite a few times, it's very much a symbolic campaign and an attempt to get people moving in the right direction.
The hour is, I think that's the point.
Yeah. Well, now this question's just come in online from one of our listeners. Earth Hour seems problematic to me because it implies that energy efficiency and action on climate change means living in the dark, and saying that that's a narrative that's been hijacked by climate skeptics. We've had just recently in Australia, I mean, just yesterday, I think, one of Australia's leading climate skeptics has launched that Ian Plimer has launched.
Hang on, as a climate skeptic in Australia?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's one or two down here.
Just the one.
Yeah, but has said that you know, if you're a green environmental person that doesn't want coal-fired power, then you should go and live in a cave and
stop using cutlery.
Stop using cutlery.
Yeah,
and in some senses, this symbolic effort and a lot of this living in the dark has been hijacked very much by the anti-environmental movement. Is that something?
I understand. And there's an organization. It's called what's it called? Something like Human Achievement Hour.
Yeah.
And Human Achievement Hour is where you turn on every single light and the engine on your car and your lawnmower, and you leave them all running for an hour to show human achievement.
And you actually suck on the exhaust pipe as well to prove that
that would be even more. That would be, yeah. So I mean, my take on this is, look, you can't run Earth Hour without being. We were lucky because we saw that they were the first generation that's able to use digital communication to connect behind a common purpose.
Yeah.
And when I talked to the beginning about this idea of you can deal with the 5% who are never going to agree with you, and they're the guys that are going to be going, oh, you were saying go live in a cave or something. Or you can spend a lot of time talking to people who already agree with you. Well, those guys are already there, so you know, you need their help. You don't need to convince them of anything. For me, the whole reason, I mean, Earth Hour is incredibly popular, and we've definitely tapped into something where people feel, yeah, I feel like I need that moment where I can be part of something, and being part of something is important. It's an excuse to reach over the garden fence and talk to someone. The idea that it's anti-technology is kind of a bit stupid, really, given that the whole thing's digital.
Yeah. I think in some senses you have to take Human Achievement Hour as a mark of your success. You know Jeremy Clarkson?
Yeah.
So Jeremy Clarkson, I think, ran that similar argument. What was interesting, I know he's in the news at the moment, but he was interestingly he was looking at there's a new BMW which is a hybrid, and it uses hardly any fuel, and it's amazing design and all that kind of stuff. And I think the big thing for me that runs the argument. Look, the future that we're looking for needs to be aspirational. It needs to be somewhere where we want to live. It needs to be cities need to be clean with blue sky. If you live in China, you need your skies to be blue again.
Yeah.
If you live here in Singapore, you don't need the haze. You know, the future we're talking about, the future that we're really after, is better for everyone and is aspirational. And that's what we need to focus on. I think one of the great challenges with the environment movement, one of the great challenges with climate change is it's easy to get drawn into kind of stupid arguments. And what we really need to do is start presenting arguments that are about, okay, what we're trying to achieve here. What is the vision? And you'll find that the best politicians will paint a vision of a future that we want to go to, not one of just fear and collapse. And you can run the same argument with economies. Say again?
You've moved away from Australia, haven't you? Our best politicians really revel in fear.
Well, every now and again you get your best politicians rising to the surface again. That's the same in any country.
One day we hope. But I think it's a good call, though, this idea of it being aspirational, and that's where the negative aspirational efforts of the skeptics, etc., work so well. Claiming that if you're into Earth Hour, if you're into climate change and you believe we should spare energy and that sort of thing, then you want us to live in the Stone Age. It's an easy fear campaign to write, this negative aspirational thing. But I'm curious more about, in terms of you inspiring people, are there any other examples, like really good ones that you can say, a tribute to Earth Hour, the fact that people got around Earth Hour, then they did X or then they did Y? I mean...
Yeah, look, I think the coolest thing with Earth Hour is we built it to be open source, so that anybody and everybody can run with it. So I think the criticism you often get with Earth Hour is an hour's not enough, or what are you going to do next? My view is that what we're trying to do with Earth Hour, what we tried to do with Earth Hour, is build a movement that says it belongs to you. You can run with it. If you want to do something with it, you go for it. It's kind
of you don't like your job. You want to hand your job over to the people and do something new now.
Well, actually, this is my last ever Earth Hour. I leave at the end of August, so after 8 years, yeah. So I'll be doing my own mini Earth Hour on March the 28th next year. But so there you go.
Why do we need a mini one when we got the big one?
I'll be doing my own one in my house.
Oh, you're just going to sit there with the lights off. Right. So
lights on and off. I find that really therapeutic sometimes. Just as an aside.
What are some of the most ridiculous criticisms you've had there? Like, what are your favourite outrageous ones, or a bit of abuse?
I think the technology one is always pretty mad, but I think every year we'll end up getting something from the southern USA where there'll be, that's where probably the most abusive emails come from.
Yeah.
Around Earth Hour. But the thing that on the other side of that is where you get, probably the coolest email we ever got, the coolest communication we ever got was from Libya, and these two lads who'd been in the army fighting against Gaddafi. This is back in 2012, and they wrote to us, and the civil war was kind of stopped as far as it had at that point. And they said, look, we wanted to do Earth Hour last year, but we couldn't because we were fighting. So we ended up setting up a Facebook page in Libya, for Earth Hour Libya Facebook page, and they started it, and it went off in Tripoli and then in Benghazi, and I think this year was in 5 different cities. So that's the kind of thing where you go, for all the criticism, you can look at something and go, look, this is an amazing movement where people can self-start and get things happening themselves, and really it's over to them how they do it. And the Russian idea came from Russia; it didn't come from us. Yeah. There's the first Earth Hour forest in Uganda, which it's small. It's only like 500,000 trees, but started by local people in Uganda going, this is what we're going to do for Earth Hour. So that's kind of for me, that's what's the coolest thing about it.
And there's a great dynamic there as well that you as a sort of coordinating body to some extent can pass those ideas. I mean, I'm really interested in that I will if you will campaign right now.
That sounds awesome.
And I think it's a good dynamic, and I think passing those things around to other places around the world could be a really useful thing to do.
Well, this year we started a part of the campaign which is called Earth Hour Blue, and Earth Hour Blue is going right. So remember the third stage, how do you build the movement part of it? We realised obviously that some of the big results we've got are all being crowd driven. So we started this platform that allows you to do crowdfunding and crowdsourcing for the big campaigns. So again, the Russians pulled off some really great crowdfunding. For the first time, Earth Hour has done crowdfunding, and this is money that basically comes from community, goes back into community projects. We had a really good one in Singapore as well, and a really good one in the Philippines, which was around refitting local fishermen with fishing boats that wouldn't need them to cut down forests to build them. So you start to get into this world where Earth Hour is defined by the community, by different countries, by different cities, by different people, and I think that's probably where the future is in a really big way, because it almost it takes out the middleman. It means that you can start tapping into a community and building things that you want to do, and if the community likes it, they'll support you, and if they don't, they won't.
Why are you calling it Earth Hour Blue though? Because for my mind, I was a child and a teenager in the 80s. Blue implies pornography, so I'm thinking you're trying to link Earth Hour with the porn industry, which I think is a genius idea, but I'm guessing that's not what you really meant. Why is it blue?
So the original idea of blue didn't actually come from that, though if that gets us more traffic, then I guess that's a good thing. But it really came from the idea that we've been seeing a lot of stories around people missing the blue sky in their cities, particularly in Asia. So, in fact, the mayor of Beijing currently, his next campaign there is a promise within it that he will bring back the blue skies to Beijing. And I think that's kind of when you start to look at environmental issues, it is no longer the green. It's a green issue, or it's you're now in a state where if you live in some of these cities, the chance of your kids not having breathing problems is pretty low. I mean, you haven't seen the sky for months. And so these are pretty cataclysmic issues, Yeah,
look, and I think that's more important than pornography, I have to say. I think the idea of blue sky should come first. I've been in Beijing a couple of years ago when it was raining, and it was like mud fell from the sky. It was quite startling.
Yeah, it's scary, right? Yeah. When the haze came across Singapore, so this is the haze that's happening because of the burning in Sumatra. I mean, the whole city closed down, and it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. You are affected by that haze. You can't go to work. It's that bad. So,
do you think in some senses there's a level to which we in the West often frame everything about the environmental movement in terms of climate change now, and I think obviously climate change is the key issue. but a lot of this is also very much, haze in a city, Beijing or Cairo or wherever, is actually a local and an industrial issue. It's about local policies and local industry and things, but it's not actually, it's connected with climate change, but it is actually more importantly about local policies and local ideas.
Tangible, it's actually there and you can see it, taste it and hate it.
Yeah, look, I think it's all so interconnected that we have to start thinking of it as being interconnected. I think one of the problems we have in terms of communicating this stuff is you try and break it down into, oh, that's climate change, or that's air pollution, or that's water quality. For me, this is about, go back to that idea. If you wanted to live in an aspiration, you want to live in a city, you want it to have clean air, you want to have clean water, you want to have fresh food, you want to have ease of getting to work or not having to go to work because you can work at home or whatever, that it doesn't mean you don't want to have cars that go fast. That you just want cars that go fast that are clean. It doesn't mean that you don't want to be able to, for me, you have to see it. My view of this is it has to be a more holistic view of the problem. And I think what's happening. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, well, what I was going to ask is the relationship that you see between individual action on environmental issues and government policy, because Earth Hour, obviously the symbolism very much targets individual action. It's turning off your lights, and the step forward in individual action there, not necessarily by Earth Hour, but is always more efficient light bulbs, a more efficient car, those kinds of things that are very individual action. But do you feel that the solution to climate change and environmental issues is either at the individual action end of the scale, or do we need to be forcing governments to change the policy on light bulbs?
Oh, look, I think that if a government thinks you don't care, then they're not going to do anything. And if the government doesn't hear your voice, they won't move. If a company doesn't hear your voice, they won't move. If a company hears your voice and they think that they can monetize that, then they'll move. So you demand a certain product and you demand it to have X, Y, and Z criteria, then that product will be the one they're trying to do. And if a company feels that they've got a problem and that they're creating that problem and it's going to affect their shareholder value, not all, obviously some companies are not like this, and maybe if you look at the resource industry, that's probably the one that's the most difficult to deal with. But you look at something like the Unilever and palm oil. So palm oil is what's most in Singapore. 50% of products on the shelf have palm oil in them. Now it's in Unilever's. It's to their advantage to produce sustainable palm oil or non-palm oil products, because the consumer doesn't want to be buying a product that's going to essentially create haze, which unsustainable palm oil indirectly is. So there's a link on almost everything. So the question for me is, if you're a government, if you're government of Australia and you're looking at the Great Barrier Reef and you're building 5 ports there and no one's saying anything about it, then you're going to carry on building. Whereas if you're in Australia, you should be going, and as a keen diver and as an Australian citizen, it makes me cranky, the idea that this great global icon, this amazing piece of Australia is being put to threat. But I need to use my voice. So I think it's always both ends.
I'll ask you, because we're going to run out of time quite soon, which is a pity, but it's always the case. Are you, broadly speaking, optimistic or pessimistic about the way the shift to renewables, the climate awareness and change? Where's your head at right now? And this sounds like fence sitting. I'm both. I sort of look at some stuff and I go, I can't actually believe, like the stuff around the Great Barrier Reef. I actually look at that and go, I cannot believe that is happening. Yeah. I just look at it and I think, how can we be allowing that to happen? It's just mad, stupid, and profit is directed into the pockets of a few, not it's actual madness. Yeah. On the other side, I look at some of the progress that's happened. I look at the response we get on Earth Hour. I look at some of the responses from some companies, what Unilever, for example, is doing on palm oil, what some of the other companies are now beginning to follow on that, and go, look, this stuff can be done. But I just strongly and passionately believe that we have more power than we think we do, and that the collective power that we possess is extraordinary, and we have, for the first time in history, the power to be able to bring that together, and that's what we've got to do. I don't think we're doing it well enough. I think we've got a long way to go, but I also think that the technology is moving so fast now that it becomes more and more possible. And you only have to look at what sort of like the Facebooks and the Apples are beginning to do in terms of environment, in terms of how they're
acting as companies, and it has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. So pressure and action, and use your voice, you know, all those things.
Done.
On that note, I think we have to thank Andy very much for a really stimulating discussion of where Earth Hour is and where we're going on in the future. I wanted to find out more, but that's always the way. Rod, who do we have next week?
Next week we're going to talk to Sarah Keenahan, and she's unfortunately one of our most avid watchers. So we're going to be cutting our audience in half by talking to her. But she's a science blogger, science communicator extraordinaire, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how she's done it. She's like a ground-up real person. We're going to talk to a real person. I think that's important.
Real person. Wow. Awesome. Thanks again, Andy. That's awesome.
Thanks, guys.